Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
The Projection Booth is single-handedly the greatest film podcast you could ever listen to or could possibly want.
Top notch. 5 stars. This has quickly become one of my favorite film-related podcasts. Always interesting.
A completely unpretentious yet fully comprehensive look at films from all genres.
The Projection Booth podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.
You are listening to the In the Mouth of Dorkness podcast. Here are Brad, Lisa, Brian, and Darren.
Welcome to another edition of the HOMEWORKcast podcast. With me is Brian Young, the Turtle Dork.
Hello, everybody.
Also joining us is Lisa Gullickson, Wife Dork.
Hello.
And Brad Gullickson, Mouth Dork.
I feel so optimistic eating these gummy bears.
And I'm your host, Darren Smith, the Disco Dork. Welcome to the HOMEWORKcast podcast, HOMEWORKcast.
Fuck you, I'm going to Guam.
Whoa. This episode, Brian Young, the Turtle Dork, we're going to talk about your homework assignment.
This is the return of the HOMEWORKcast. It's been a while.
It's been a while. Yeah.
We have just been ripe with content. We are like a fruitful vine, just dropping juicy treasures.
Yes. But now back to
Why
business.
start sentences, Lisa? Unless you know where they're fucking going.
I want some of them juicy treasures.
Juicy treasures. Talking about juicy treasures, Brian, what was your homework?
Ooh, my homework was, juicy. So it's one way to describe it. It is Hedwig and the Angry Inch, a film from 2001, a rock musical.
Yes.
Yeah. So, where to begin? Okay, so let's start with...
Who gave you this homework, Brian?
Oh, it would be Wife Dork.
Yes, it was me. I'm so sweet.
Yes, thank you.
It had actually been like a decade since I'd seen it. Because I remember I watched it when my older sister had her first child, Rory. I went to go stay at her house and help with the new baby. And Rory is like in middle school now. So it's been a while. It's been a few since I'd seen this film. But I remember it really impacting me. And then after watching it, initially it made me, there's lots to chew on. There's lots to think about. Yeah, and there's lots to me, like as a very sheltered child. Though at this point I was probably in my 20s, but still very sheltered person in general. There's just a lot of like in your face stuff that you just have to deal with. But the music, and I loved it, and I loved it from the get-go, but it was just a lot. And but the music invaded my brain, and I immediately got the soundtrack, and I was listening to it constantly. Yeah. And it was time for me to watch it again. Plus, with the homework, I really want to give stuff that you would not seek out on your own. And you had just seen La La Land, and you're like, musicals are great. And I'm like, you like musicals, huh? So I gave you Hedwig.
I like that movie.
Shots fired. Shots fired.
I don't categorize things by genre. I mean, if there's something that I like, but I'm open to exploring more musicals.
Yes. So I think Hedwig's a great place to be in the middle of, and to start there is a terrible place to start, but it's a wonderful place to middle.
Yeah, like you said too, it was a movie that I wouldn't have seeked out myself. I never even really heard of this movie, but looking at the poster or the cover art for it, it seems like something that I may have seen before or in passing. Maybe you've seen it at Blockbuster somewhere. I'm not sure.
Well,
but
and culturally, I think this definitely was on fire in the early 2000s.
It's got some serious cult status. It was considered a box office bomb. Okay. But it's definitely got some devotees, just like Hedwig did. I love how in every scene, even in the most uptight Midwestern restaurant, she, complicated, had some serious fans.
Oh yeah.
So let's start with what is Hedwig and the Angry Inch? What's the plot?
Let's go right to the synopsis here. So here, from what I pulled up on IMDb, a transgender punk rock girl from East Berlin tours the U.S. with her band as she tells her life story and follows the former the former lover, bandmate who stole her songs. And I really got into the first 5 to 10 minutes of this film. It really does kind of pull you in. Because we start off with this opening number during the credit sequence, and I thought it was a fantastic credit sequence. I mean, it's a movie that really just kind of just grabs you at the very start of the film, and you basically go through this whole number. It's not truncated, it's not short. You basically go from the song beginning to end, during the whole credit sequence, and then you realize as you kind of get introduced to Hedwig and then her bandmates that there's this other. Star, what's his name?
Tommy
Gnosis, played
by Michael Pitt.
Michael Pitt, who we recently saw in Ghost in the Shell.
Barely.
Yeah. And he's made it big and fame and everything. And then we see that Hedwig has some type of animosity towards Tommy, but
They're
we
clearly
really don't know.
Former lovers. They're former lovers, and he has stolen her songs.
Yeah, and so we learned that when we talked to her manager. There's a scene, and then
Phyllis Stein.
Phyllis Stein. Is that her character's name?
Yeah, her character's name is Phyllis Stein. It's not a gentle.
It's not subtle.
Not a subtle film.
Phyllis Stein. Yeah.
Played by Andrea Martin from Second City.
Yeah, SCTV.
Yeah, she was really good. I liked her. I liked her in this role. But I like how the movie just kind of reveals a little bit more and more. So every time that Tommy Gnosis goes on tour and sells out one of these big venues, she's in the same city playing at one of these dining establishments, almost like a Denny's.
What was it called? Like a Bilgewater or something?
It's
Water?
Yeah. Willy Loman Hell. Like Death of a Salesman dinner theater. That's basically the musical equivalent that she is performing at.
Yeah. So we learned that, so when I learned that, I was like, oh, okay, is she stalking him?
She's stalking him, but also at the same time they're in a lawsuit.
Absolutely.
So she is suing Tommy to get her songs back.
Get her songs because she made him a star. She wrote all of his music, and now he became big, and she's still doing these small little, numbers at these small little Denny-style restaurants. So that really kind of sets up the story, or at least the is the
conflict.
The conflict. But then I don't know, you get to explore so much more about Hedwig, about the band, not just through the music, but just in those moments that they have in between.
Yeah, she pretty much just monologues. We follow her from shitty venue to shitty venue, and we learn about her life through these monologues and through flashback.
Through the flashbacks, and
for the most part.
Yeah, and I knew through the songs, because it was so weird, because I could definitely feel that the songs were kind of pushing the narrative forward, but it was just so just the way it was shot and what was going on, the one where the food fight broke out, and all this crazy stuff was happening. But I really enjoyed the flashback moments when you go back to her time in East Berlin. As a young boy, and then she's, like you say, she's giving these monologues, and it just really establishes where she kind of came from and where she is now.
The image of her mother peeling tomatoes while she as a young boy is practicing singing inside the oven.
Yeah,
it's a really stark, grim origin story for Hedwig.
Yeah, and just what they allude to as far as his relationship with the parents, with her father, his father at that time.
Can we go beat by beat? I desperately want to go beat by beat. Yeah. So that opening number is a number called "Tear Me Down," and if you notice, her cape is some really iconic. Graffiti from the Berlin Wall. So she's essentially the Berlin Wall. And we find out that that she was a little boy named Hansel in East Berlin. And
Hansel, how great is that name?
I know. And her father was an American GI, and he ended up leaving him and his mother. And after that number, after we find this out about him, we hear the song "The Origin of Love." Do you remember that with the animation?
Oh, in the beginning?
In the beginning. That's right in the beginning.
Okay.
So
that's not with the two faces.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So so what did you think about The Origin of Love? Because 10 years later, it was that number that really stuck with me.
I mean, it shows to me it fleshes her character out as far as her trying to figure out her identity. Mm-hmm. Because it's almost like a duality that she has, and the conflict that she has of having these two different identities. Right. So the
song actually, the story that is encased in this song, "The Origin of Love," comes from Plato's Symposium. I found this out on IMDb trivia. I did not have this information at my fingertips, but it's from Plato's Symposium.
Very honest of you, Lisa.
Where Aristophanes makes a speech about how in ancient times, human beings had two sets of eyes and two sets of arms and two sets of legs. And they walked around feeling whole and feeling complete. But then the gods started to become concerned that these humans are going to take over Olympus because they have all of this confidence. And so Zeus sent down lightning bolts and split human beings in half. So now everybody is walking around as an incomplete half with one set of eyes and one set of arms and one set of legs. And they're just, and everybody is just seeking that other half of themselves and to feel complete and to feel whole. And that's what love is, when you find that other person that completes you. And it's just full of this, it's this really stunning, simple animation that accompanies this. It's really beautiful. The illustrator is named Emily Hubel, and she's still at it. She's still animating, and she animates in that style where every person's face looks a little bit like a puzzle piece. But it's just a really beautiful story, and it really reflects that seeking side of Hedwig and how she feels that there is a piece of her missing, and that she needs someone else to make her whole. And she feels like an incomplete person, essentially. And that duality becomes this theme throughout the film. And when you read the IMDb synopsis, they call her transgendered, but I don't know if that's absolutely the truth. I don't think that her story is necessarily a transgendered story. It certainly addresses this spectrum of gender, but the next part of Hansel / Hedwig's chapter goes into more of the origins of where the circumstances that essentially created Hedwig, and it was not a fulfillment of a person that she thought she was. It was she was a victim of circumstance. So after this origin of love story, we have that scene that Brad was talking about, and we're caught up to where we were talking before, where her mom is cutting the tomatoes, and his mom is a sculpture teacher and a single mom, and Hedwig is obsessed with listening to American music and listening to rock and roll through the American.
So that scene of Hansel dancing on the bed, just full on unconscious rock out, because we have already seen Hedwig's performance, I felt like the through line from that child's gestures perfectly mimicked what would evolve into the performance of Hedwig. I mean, I loved that kid on the bed. That kid on the bed. It's so silly and honest and singular. Like that's how a child would interpret punk rock dance, and John Cameron Mitchell's translation of that childhood spirit, that childhood energy on stage is incredibly profound. And I wanted to know more about how did they direct that kid who's playing Hansel, and was John Cameron Mitchell's style of dance, of stage presence first, and then they reverse engineered back to that child, or not?
Well, the character of Hedwig had already existed for a long time. John Cameron Mitchell actually came up with Hedwig just doing drag shows in New York, and he was kind of improvising these little numbers, and him and Stephen Trask kind of reverse engineered the story for this character, taking pieces out of John Cameron Mitchell's own life, because John Cameron Mitchell, his dad was an American GI. He also took pieces out of on the base. There was this German divorcee who was also working as a prostitute, and he took elements from her life and created this character of Hedwig, and then Hedwig then got turned into this musical that then got turned into this movie. So the character of Hedwig existed.
So,
before this film.
When the film starts for me and you're introduced to the character of Hedwig and John Cameron Mitchell, I mean, it's magnetic. It's like it's a ton of fun to watch.
He's amazing.
And you're hooked into him. Or that performance. But it's in this weird Grimm's fairy tale origin story, the transition from Hansel to Hedwig, where you fall in love with the tragedy of his story.
Absolutely.
And that kid, the kid playing Hansel, and John Cameron Mitchell also, when he's portraying Hansel as a teenager, I mean, it's beautiful and relatable and horrible and wonderful,
right?
And fantastic, and the way that those stories feel like a fairy tale. They feel like a storybook.
It feels like a rock album. Like, when there's a theme rock album, and the rock album kind of tells a story, but mostly it's just about the music and about the feeling. And it's kind of your job as the listener to kind of fill in. I get that sense a lot from Hedwig, and a lot of the details you have to fill in for yourself.
It's interesting, but again, going back to how those flashbacks are portrayed versus the rest of the film.
It is dreamy. It's dreamlike.
Dreamy. That's what I felt, and I was thinking a lot about the film Hannah, the Joe Wright movie, the action film with Saoirse Ronan, and how Grimm's fairy tale would periodically creep into that movie. I don't know. Anyway,
I also think the fact
I loved it.
That it's all told in reminiscence, like. So the next time we see Hedwig in the present,
it's being told from the stage too.
Yeah. So the next time we see Hedwig in the present, she is. I keep messing it up. She's performing at what's called the Menzies Fair, which I think is just like a funny spin on Lilith Fair, and she's at this tiny stage way off. By the toilets.
It's like stage 19.
And there is just one little sweet goth girl, like, standing and listening. Do you remember this?
I think so. I do remember the men's.
It's like all by the porta potties.
Yeah, and so it starts off with Hedwig. She's addressing an audience, but there's really just one person standing there, and so she invites the one audience member to come sit next to her and listen to the next part of her story. And the next part of her story is now Hansel is now a teenager and is just a gay teen in East Berlin, and he has kind of a longish in the front haircut, extremely 90s in my opinion, but with highlights in front. But he is clearly a boy, and he is sunning himself in the middle of ruins. Essentially, he found a nice bombed out hole where he can sun himself, and he's laying nude. And Sergeant Luther Robinson comes along and offers him some American gummy bears. And he eats those American gummy bears, and they're so much more colorful and wonderful than the American gummy bears. And eventually, they fall in love, I guess. So.
Okay, yeah. Because they end up. Didn't they get married?
Yeah. So what ends up happening is Sergeant Robinson says, I want to marry you and I want to bring you back to the United States.
Yeah, because then they moved to,
But I can't marry you like this. Mm-hmm. I can't marry you as a boy. Because here in East Berlin, to get married, you have to have a full physical, and they'll see that you have a penis. Yeah. And the mom is all too eager to jump on and say, well, I never thought you should have one of those, and I know someone who can take care of it, and so he's kind of like, okay, and so he goes through this surgery.
I'm sorry. What year does this start? This story take place? This part?
This is right before the fall of the Berlin Wall. So look it up.
It's the 80s.
Okay.
The mid 80s.
Okay. Yeah. So Hansel goes through the surgery. He is now she, essentially. Yeah. And she takes mom's passport, and mom's name is Hedwig. And so that's how she becomes, and she marries him and takes his name. So that's how she becomes Hedwig Robinson. Mm-hmm. But to me, I don't think that in that instance, it's necessarily a trans story, because she was a gay boy and a gay man, and she didn't choose
looking for escape.
Looking for escape, and her going through that surgery was a compromise, so to speak.
Yeah, it wasn't his choice to have.
Exactly. And I think that that's really interesting, the fact that that Hedwig came from a drag character, because men who do drag are always men. If it's it's like a man doing drag is not a trans person or a transgendered person. Yeah. They're men, and they're doing a performance. Yeah. So I feel like Hedwig is this crazy blurred identity between gender, and I think ultimately goes beyond gender, and we hear that later in the song where she's more than woman or man.
Well, and it goes back to that origin of love.
Right, and we see that come back.
So
later.
Does she get boobs too, or just
no, she just kind of
she uses tomatoes.
She uses tomatoes. Actually, we find that later. Yeah. But so she ends up going to the United States, and she is living as Hedwig, and then Luther finds another boy and leaves her. Yeah, and so she has to kind of make her life from that point, and that's where we get the number Angry Inch, which is a really intense punk number. So which results in the riot. So what did you think about that particular scene?
That I mean, I liked the performance of the Angry Inch, and then seeing when when Luther, like when they were in the trailer park, and he basically tells her that he found someone else and that he's leaving, and then it just kind of abruptly the other boy is right there, then they just walk out, and she's just standing there alone. I'm like, shit,
right?
You basically took her away from, a family like this, from Berlin, even though it probably wasn't the best, living environment in the first place. But I know she was probably expecting to have this life, with him. And then all of a sudden just abruptly just leaves. But the performance really just kind of showcases like just that anger that she had in that moment. And I mean, it leads into that riot, which is just basically an extension of that. I don't know. I like the song, too. I thought the song was really catchy and really cool. So I like that whole moment. That was like one of my favorite moments.
Right. It's really a stirring number. And then Hedwig has to kind of pick up and live the rest of her life.
Yeah.
Which is where we get... so right after that happens, actually, right after she's left, the Berlin Wall comes down.
Yeah, they show that.
The Berlin Wall comes down, and she realizes that if she had just waited in East Berlin...
It's kind of a Twilight Zone moment.
Yeah, if she had just waited in East Berlin, she wouldn't have had to have the surgery and leave the way that she did. But then we get the number Wig in a Box.
Yeah. That's the one I think I kept, like, that stayed with me throughout the movie, that I kept humming afterwards. I can't remember how it went now.
Da, 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 da. I don't remember the words either.
Yeah.
But that song is essentially like, well, you got to keep going. You got to just brush yourself off and continue to live your life. And she continues to live her life as Hedwig.
Yeah.
And continues to pursue her music. And so now, back in the present, in Tommy Nose's lawsuit present, things with the band are kind of becoming very tense.
Yeah.
Very tense. And we haven't even talked about her husband at this point. So, do you remember the husband character? She has a husband named Yaksik who is in the band with her.
Yeah, but what is that the lead guitarist with the beard?
Yes.
And the, okay.
Yes.
Because
that's really confusing.
Yeah.
In the story, and I actually had to have.
Well, I
Wikipedia.
knew they had a relationship together, but I mean, I guess the spoilers.
They don't explicitly say that they're husband and wife in the movie, do they?
But you see,
yeah, they do because they say that they have to get a divorce.
Oh
yeah. But see, I didn't know if she meant like get a divorce from the band, but yeah, I do remember that scene where he comes in and says, I need to get a divorce.
Well, when you first meet Yitzhak,
they never say his name in the movie.
When you first meet him, he is stroking Hedwig's wig,
right?
And there's this idea that he has a longing for her, I don't know, spotlight, her position on the stage. Her presence, but Hedwig keeps him at a distance during the performance.
Right. So in the original musical, Yaksik was actually a drag queen, so a male who performed as a female character. I think. I forgot her name. I did not write it down. But he performed as this drag character. And Hedwig said that they couldn't get married unless he stopped performing in drag because she was afraid that he was going to take the spotlight from her. And so he kind of always resented that part of their relationship, and that's why he has this obsession with like wigs and wanting to express this side of
but that
himself.
Angle is missing from the film.
Yeah, it's missing from the film. And also another thing from the musical that comes across as a little bit weird in the film is even though it's a male character, it's always played by a female. on the stage.
Yeah, in this case, Miriam Shore.
Yeah.
Miriam Shore, who was actually from the original Broadway cast.
Okay.
And
that confused me.
And
a
it
little bit.
is confusing,
Yeah.
especially with her transformation at the end. And
Yeah.
you know, she looks like a woman, and she is a woman because
Yeah.
she's played by a woman. But story-wise, she is a man.
Okay.
It's a little confusing, but
Yeah.
but it's confusing on purpose. It's supposed to be mind bendy, gender bendy, and so in that pursuit, it succeeds tenfold.
Yeah, it confused me.
But yeah. So, but she sees a casting. He sees a casting call for Rent, and we see him take. And he wants to play Angel in Rent, and Angel is a character that's played in drag, and is a trans character. So there you go. So in the present, Hedwig's world is kind of coming apart, and in losing. Like as her band is starting to pull away, and she's driving them crazy with all of this Tommy Gnosis obsession.
Yeah.
She starts kind of relying on her fans and going more into alcohol. So then we get to see a little bit more of Hedwig's life following her divorce. And that's when we get to see her her first incarnation of her band. And so she finds a bunch of Korean GI wives, and they apparently make a pretty sick rhythm section, and they start a band together.
I wanted that spin-off movie.
I know, it was so fun. Yeah. And so she starts doing that, and then the Tommy character comes in. So what is Tommy like when we meet him?
He's just kind of like this kid, like this really kind of reserved, kind of shy.
Jesus freak.
Yeah, he's very, very religious, Jesus freak, and
classic rock fan, which cannot stand.
Yeah, so being introduced to Hedwig was kind of almost like a culture shock for him, but he seemed to kind of be into it. I think it was something that was enticing to him to a certain extent, but he definitely wanted to kind of discover and learn more about it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it was just interesting to see the genesis of his character from where we saw him at the beginning being like this very famous rock star, but seeing how he started. And then it's almost, you see the tragedy in it as well, because knowing everything in the beginning with Hedwig and the lawsuit, and then seeing how everything started, like, it's like, damn, like he really just kind of, screwed her over. And that's one thing I kind of took away from it. It was just like Hedwig just kept getting screwed over and over by all these people that she kept trusting and running into. And so I mean, I really felt a sense of tragedy for her, especially going to those flashbacks with Tommy. I'm like, knowing where that was going to end up, it's like, fuck, like, it's just, it was kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah. So she starts molding Tommy and trying to get him into the things that she's into, and he's obsessed with her, and so he starts taking on her ideals, and they start performing together, and they start having a romantic relationship, and he has some knowledge, like some deeper knowledge that that she is not a regular lady. I don't know how to say it, because they the way she puts it is he'll only love her from behind.
From behind, yep, yeah.
But he's in denial about this. So
that's
finally,
so did he know or no? Because
I think that he was in denial, and I think that he was scared. And then when he finally engaged with her friend, it was a shock to him. Yeah. And I don't think it's because he expected to find lady parts, but he certainly did not expect to find what
angry inch.
What Hedwig had to work with, which was a mangled mess, essentially. So he rejects her from that point, and I think that really is their split.
I think it was.
But he continues. So they kind of had a dual act, but then he continued to perform her songs is essentially what we have to extrapolate. And she also does this thing where they're trying to create his image, and she takes some eyeshadow, and she also gives him his name, which is Tommy Gnosis, and Gnosis means knowledge, and she draws a cross on his forehead. Yeah. And we see that cross come back later in the story, which I think is fairly significant. So back in the present, Yaksik decides to auditions for Rent and takes the role. Yeah. And decides to not only leave the band but leave the relationship. And with that, the band falls apart, and Hedwig finds herself on this. Oh, so Hedwig rips up Yaksik's passport, so that he can't travel, and so the whole band turns on her because it's a disgusting thing to do, and so she finds herself working a street corner, and
that's when she runs back into Tommy.
Tommy is trolling.
Yeah, because she's working the corner one night, and then his limo pulls up. I wonder if he knew that was. He probably did.
I'm thinking that he probably is a man who is attracted to trans women, and so he's probably looking for trans women and runs into Hedwig. That's what I think.
Yeah.
And so they get in the car together, and he kind of half apologizes by writing her name on his CD in Sharpie. I'm like, that doesn't count. But then they start kind of reminiscing about old times. And then what happens?
They're singing a song, and I guess he uses one of the lyrics. He uses like the wrong word.
Yeah, he says Cyrus, which is like the name of a southern yokel, as opposed to Osiris.
Yeah,
in a terrible Jonah Hill film.
Yeah.
And she flips out on him because of that. And
he fucks up the lyrics.
Yeah, and I think it just plays to that whole thing. It's like, okay, he became such this big star, but she wrote all of basically his songs, but he's not even saying the words right or using them wrong, and so and it's like that was an interesting scene, to watch between the two of them.
Right, and it causes a car accident, so now he finds himself in a little bit of an. What was it? Was it Eddie Murphy? Who did that? Who found himself with a?
Oh yeah, it was Eddie Murphy.
Eddie Murphy.
Yeah, it was Eddie Murphy.
So he gets caught with Hedwig, and it's all over the papers. And did they know each other before? And he's denying it because he's an asshole, selfish person. And so then we're back on the road with Hedwig playing the Bilgewater across from Tommy, and
she's reunited back with her band.
Yeah,
but they never showed the how they got back together, right?
I think that Hedwig just got a lot of exposure, and I think it kind of just. I think that they maybe just wanted to get the band back together and kind of. I think maybe Hedwig just been through a lot. You make an excellent point. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I couldn't remember because it just seemed like the band was back because after they split, they were reunited back together and they're back on stage. So I just thought like right there something may have been missing as far as like, I didn't know if Hedwig apologized to them or if they kind of rallied behind her to get back together. But I don't know if we saw any of that that reconnection with them.
Yeah. But we hear Hedwig's lament where there's a lyric that says, I gave a piece to my mother, I gave a piece to my man, I gave a piece to the rock star, and he took the best stuff and ran.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that, like, through the exposure of her and Tommy, I think that they could see the pain and kind of... I think that they just kind of felt sorry for her. And also, now this brings new juice to the tour because now she is a success, I guess any exposure is good exposure. I guess. So they're performing again across from Tommy, and then Hedwig kind of has this emotional break. Yeah. Where she pulls her dress off and pulls her wig off, and then she's not Hansel, she's not Hedwig, but she's just nothing, and so she walks across to go see Tommy.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting too, which I think calls back to the beginning with that first number, because he had earlier in the movie we saw a tattoo on Hedwig's hip, and it was of those two faces split.
Right.
And then when we cut to Hedwig in the alley walking across, you see
that's actually the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's something that happens in between that. So she goes sees Tommy Gnosis, and they have a moment where they're singing to each other and apologizing to each other.
That was after the performance?
That was after she leaves the Bilgewater, and she is wearing just.
And she goes to the stadium.
To
witness Tommy on stage.
And Tommy walks.
And he's like in there's like one beam of light coming down, lighting him on his, and it's just him and the microphone, and Hedwig is witnessing from.
And there's a reprise of Wicked Little Town.
I don't know if I saw that. I don't think I saw. Oh, is there a different cut? Because I don't remember that scene.
Yeah, no, it's pivotal. So it's essentially they're singing. Tommy sings to her essentially that she was more than a woman and more than a man, and she was this profound influence, but then he stops singing and his track continues to play and he mouths goodbye and then he walks away. It's everything.
Whoa.
So he walks away.
Okay.
Like from her life forever?
From her life forever.
Ugh.
He's like, like you're more than anybody I've ever met, but at the same time, he can't handle it. So he walks away. And so then we have that final number.
Wait, let me ask you, what do you think about that as a character choice? Like as far as Tommy, like
I think that Tommy never wanted to be Tommy Gnosis. I think that it's just who he is now, but I think that final scene with the band back together, there's kind of a dream sequence, and now Hedwig is performing without a top on, just as a androgynous man person, I guess, kind of. But now Hedwig, or Hansel, now has the Tommy Gnosis cross on his head. And what I think is that Hedwig's other half was always himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he turned Tommy into the person that he wanted to be. And essentially he kind of Hedwig, Hansel transcended gender to become this complete person. Mm-hmm. Hedwig's no longer a woman, no longer than a man, but more than that, and is now just a complete person.
By himself.
The gender of one, or herself. Him or herself.
By herself. By itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's like that completion of that origin of love story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the significance of what I took away from,
exactly.
The shot of the tattoo.
Yeah, so the last shot of the film is Hedwig, Hansel, Gnosis walking down an alley, and we see a shot of a tattoo on his other hip, and it's a complete face.
Yeah.
And
he's walking into the world.
Yeah, just completely naked.
Yeah.
And nobody's really noticing.
And nobody notices
or cares. Yeah. But I think that it's just like it's a complicated story, but it's a beautiful story, and it's easy to get hung up in the gender of the story, but I find that like Hedwig is so much more than that.
With that ending, Brian, how did how did you feel emotionally? Did that affect you in any way emotionally regarding Hedwig as a character or whatever she transcended to become?
Yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my brain around just the movie.
You watched it this morning, right?
Yesterday.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot to process. Yeah. And like when I had never seen it before. And, Hedwig was a film that certainly I remember being, even if it wasn't a box office success, I remember it being like kind of like a landmark.
It won a lot of like independent awards.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think in 2001 it was certainly a film I was not open to or prepared for. And it is a movie, and we had a lot of conversation while we were watching the movie and also after the film trying to unpack it. There's a lot going on in the movie, which is one of its great appeals. Yeah. It's not something that, Hedwig walks out from that alley, credits roll. Oh, I get that. I think it's a movie that I will be thinking about and watching and revisiting and unpacking for a long time.
That's what I took away from the last moments of the film, is like going back to the whole thing about completion and becoming whole, and then, Hedwig realizing that it wasn't someone else, or it wasn't about, whether he was a man or a woman, but, just like you say, transcending that and becoming a complete person and accepting, whatever, he was or she was.
I find that it's an incredibly universal story.
Yeah.
Where I think in 2001, when I was 22, I would not have experienced.
And it's so much more deeper than like watching the first 5 or 10 minutes. Like I said, it's not necessarily just about, okay, this is about this guy who stole my music and I have a lawsuit and I'm going to try to, it goes, as the movie progresses, it gets so much deeper into the relationship between the band, Hedwig's past with her parents, and the relationship with Tommy. It gets a lot.
It's a survival.
Deeper.
It's a survival story as much as anything else. Like, he was a kid rejected by his father, and then pushed away by his mother, and then mutilated, and then left by his lover, and then betrayed by her best friends. And Hedwig is this armor that she creates for herself, and she's fighting all of the way through the movie with being strong and being aggressive and being subversive. And but Hedwig is who she is, but she's not completely the person. She's an incomplete person. And we've all had that feeling of, oh, if I just found love, or if I just found success, or if I just found fame, or if I just found whatever, then I can become the complete person I'm meant to be.
Yeah, but it doesn't work that way.
And so I think that like artists can identify with this film. LGBT people can identify with this film. Survivors of broken families, people who have just survived war-torn places. There's so much in this movie to identify with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I also want to talk about what makes this an amazing movie musical.
Okay.
So one thing that's amazing about this film is that it's not very far from the source material. So I told you a little bit about how John Cameron Mitchell, is that his first name?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Came up with this character as a drag persona, which then became an off-Broadway show. So this off-Broadway show ran for like 2 years before this film went into development.
Yeah, I think it was like 98 it started, something like that.
Right. Okay. So with John Cameron Mitchell and Stephen Trask, who did the music. Now, then John Cameron Mitchell was the director of this film. He's the star of this film. So this is not a reinterpretation of a piece. This is like a completion of a piece. So it's a continuation of an original vision.
Okay.
And they didn't go and recast everybody with a bunch of stars. Now, Michael Pitt, who plays Tommy Gnosis, is not part of the original cast, and he is the only character actually who has his voice dubbed, and his voice is actually dubbed by Stephen Trask. So the guy who wrote the music.
Yeah.
Stephen Trask is actually one of the bandmates. So if you think about the opening number, Yaksik is on her left, on Hedwig's left. The bassist on the right with the kind of emo hair and the gap in the front teeth, that's actually Stephen Trask.
Okay.
So he's in the film as one of the bandmates, and he's also the voice of Tommy Gnosis. And then Miriam Shore, Yitzhak, I've been saying it wrong the whole time. It's Yitzhak. Miriam Shore is actually from the original cast. Okay. So they actually cast real Broadway stars to do this film.
Yeah, this ain't Anne Hathaway's Les Miserables.
There's no, like, aside from Michael Pitt, there's no, like, stunt casting. And then John Cameron Mitchell performed the vocals live. So even though the music was dubbed in and they recorded the music in the studio, he performed all of Hedwig's vocals, or most of Hedwig's vocals live, and then they were mixed together. So you got that. The reason why his performances were so vital is because he'd been living with this character for years, a character of his own creation, and he was performing it the way that he wanted to perform it. I also find it extremely impressive how cinematic this movie becomes, considering that it's being directed by someone who knew the stage play so well. The fact that it could have all of these beautiful cuts and flashbacks, and each time they go to a different place, it's visually stunning. I love the image of Hedwig sitting on the mountain of tires with all of her devotees at her feet as she drinks vodka right out of the bottle and tells stories. Like, they turned this stage play into something that's extremely visual and cinematic, and feels like a movie instead of feels like a staged musical. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I felt that as the movie went along, like in the beginning, it definitely, because I didn't really know that it was a play until I like read up on it, but it definitely in the beginning, especially with a lot of the numbers, it felt like a stage play musical. But as the movie kind of progressed, especially towards the end, I definitely felt that it started to feel more cinematic in the way, like you say, some of the locations and the way he was using the camera, and just the lighting and the composition. It felt a lot more cinematic, I thought, towards the second half and towards the end of the film.
Right, and John Cameron Mitchell actually did go on to direct 2 other films and direct a bunch of TV, one of which was Short Bus, and what was the other one?
Rabbit Hole.
And Rabbit Hole. So those 2 films, I think, are both very controversial films. I have not seen either of them. Darren's nodding his head. But he definitely has an aesthetic and an aggressive voice that he wants to share. And I think that the completeness of Hedwig and the sophistication of this character reaches just the height of artistic creation. I think that she is amazing, an amazing character.
I definitely want to see those other 2 movies. Like, I think Hedwig and the Angry Inch is a extreme movie. Yes, it's based on a stage play, but it feels like the introduction of a fully formed creative force. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And I need to see his other films.
Yeah. So the stage play is still running, actually. So after the film came out, so it was off Broadway, and I think it remains off Broadway, but a bunch of crazy, like Taye Diggs most recently has been playing Hedwig.
Oh, wow.
Let me see if I can pull
Michael C. Hall's played Hedwig. Neil Patrick Harris has played Hedwig. Molly Ringwald?
No, not Molly Ringwald.
Not Molly Ringwald.
Somebody
Molly
else.
Shannon.
No,
No?
somebody else from the Brat Pack.
Molly somebody.
I can't.
Oh, no. Ali Sheedy. Ali
Sheedy.
Sheedy. Ali Sheedy. All three of those, Molly Shannon, Molly Ringwald, and Ali Sheedy, I think would be great Hedwigs.
Yeah. But I mean, I would love to see Hedwig as a stage play, but I think I'm glad that the first place I encountered it was as this film, because I think that this film is really beautiful. Now, I can see how it like there's not a ton of transgender characters on the screen, and I can see Hedwig being a confusing character to people who are not familiar with trans identity and transgender people. And I can see perhaps transgender people watching this film and maybe being disappointed because Hedwig ultimately at the end, it could be interpreted as chooses to be a boy. Because once John Cameron Mitchell has his clothes stripped away, he looks like a boy. But I think that the story can tell so much more than that. And I think that there can be a transgender musical, and I think that would be a beautiful thing. I just don't think that Hedwig
it's an incredibly complicated story. It's a complicated issue, certainly. But ultimately, as Roger Ebert said about cinema being machines for empathy, watching Hedwig and the Angry Inch, you experience his story, her story, and it's relatable. You connect to it.
Yeah, but everywhere you look, Hedwig is presented as a transgender story, and I think that is a misstep. And that's not how John Cameron Mitchell sees it at all. I found a quote where where he's asked about it, and he says that Hedwig is more than a woman, more than a man, and calls his gender the gender of one. Now Hedwig is no longer woman or man, but one. And I think that I wish that I could go through the Wikipedia or go on IMDb and take that word out. Because I think that it puts Hedwig in a box where she doesn't belong. And not that box should not be presented in film and in cinema, because it absolutely should. But I think that that's a missell of this story and can potentially hurt feelings.
But I also think it's a conversation start, right? I mean, immediately after watching this film, I was curious of what John Cameron Mitchell's point of view was and how the transgender community would react to this movie. And I, hit the internet, because that's what we do. And there are articles, questioning if this film is transphobic. There are articles in support, and there are articles in on attack towards this film. And I think you should watch this film, read, and continue the conversation.
What did you think of John Cameron Mitchell as a performer?
I thought it was great. I really got engaged in his performance as Hedwig. I thought it was really, really, really good.
So I have a question for both of you, and that is, Lisa, I knew you were also really nervous about Brian watching this movie and reacting to this movie. Don't answer.
Okay.
But that question would be, how do you feel about this conversation? How do you feel about Brian's response? Hold it. Let's jump over to Brian.
Okay.
Brian, I know you were really nervous about talking about this movie and not doing a disservice to this film.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, did you like Hedwig and the Angry Inch?
I did. I mean, of course I didn't dislike it. Again, it's not a movie that I would seek out. I don't know if it would be a film that I would hurry to watch again, but it's definitely a movie that if I were to see again, I think there's a lot that I could take away more from it. I mean, there was a lot that I was able to take away, not just watching the film, but just being able to talk about it and discuss it here as well. But I mean, even with that, I like movies that have a lot more to say than just what's on the surface. And this movie has a lot on its mind. And that I appreciate the film for that, and there's a lot that you could take away from it. So yeah. I mean, I definitely like the film.
How many stars?
Oh, let's not reduce everything to a letterbox
Now I
rating.
gotta know. I gotta know.
No.
Well, this is on my scale, not Darren's scale, but I would say 3 stars.
Oh, that's fine, I guess.
We're gonna have we've talked about this in multiple episodes, and if you listen to our Sarah Adina Smith interview, which is coming in the future, we talk a lot about Letterboxd there. We're gonna need to do a Letterboxd episode where we figure out what the hell's going on with this star system. But back to Lisa.
Yes.
How do you feel about Brian's experience with Hedwig and the Angry Inch?
To me, I felt like I was having to drag him through this conversation a little bit.
It's a lot to take in.
It is a lot to take in,
Yeah.
and I am like a details person, and I want you to engage with every little detail,
Yeah.
and I can't force people to watch films the way that I watch them. But I think that ultimately I'm glad that at least Brian has seen this film and that we've been able to talk about this film. I think that watching Hedwig and the Angry Inch with the mindset that you are going to talk about it and you have to have ideas about it is not necessarily what you want to do for a first watch. Maybe for a first watch, you kind of just want to soak it in and live with it a little bit.
At the same time, I think Hedwig and the Angry Inch is very much in the spirit of what we're trying to do here at ItMod with the ItMod Homeworks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So how many stars do you rate Brian's experience in this conversation?
I give, I'm not using Darren's scale, but I would say a solid 3-star conversation.
I can accept that. I feel good.
You know what? Honestly, I'm surprised by how much Brian does appear to like the movie. That makes me happy. I think a 3-star rating, which I qualify as good on the Brad scale.
Okay.
And that's how Brian rates it.
Yes.
And that's how Darren rates it. 3 stars is a good movie. That's a victory, Lisa.
Yeah, it is. And getting anybody to watch Hedwig and talk about Hedwig is an amazing thing. And I'm glad that I had an excuse to watch again because it's a tough watch. Like I loved the movie and I hadn't seen it in Rory's entire lifetime. So I
mean, it's an engaging film. You get, because like I said, putting the movie on, I really didn't know what to expect or if I was really going to be into. I thought it was going to be a chore to try to get through this film.
It's only like 95 minutes long.
Yeah, it's not long, but getting and of course this being not like outside of my world, not really knowing a lot about this world. But again, I mean, I think it's just so much deeper than just what we see as far as transgender and stuff like that. And I think everybody can pull something away from it, and that's what I kind of got engaged with. And I love the performances. I thought Cameron Mitchell, his performance as Hedwig, every scene that Hedwig was in, I was completely into. I loved his performance as Hedwig. So it definitely kept me engaged, and I mean, I really enjoyed the film.
And I also find it important that every time Hedwig is performing, there are always people who love her there.
Yeah,
Hedwig has, like they make a point of showing, the straight-laced, old couple rolling their eyes and making disgusted faces, but Hedwig always has her fans, and I think that it's important to show that, even if you have a subversive opinion and or you feel rejected by most of society, there are always going to be people on your side loving you and rooting for you and wanting to see you be you and do your thing. And I just thought that was such a wonderful detail in this story, that Hedwig was never completely rejected, no matter how alone she felt.
Absolutely.
All right. So there you have it. Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
Yes.
So are you going to now watch it, Darren? Are you
Absolutely.
curious?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. And kind of going like when we just recently spoke about Free Fire and my experience with that film, and then having a conversation about it, and then knowing what I know about the film versus my expectations of it, and those expectations not have been met. I think I'll have a similar situation with Hedwig in that listening to this conversation and getting the themes and your points of view from the film and taking those into my viewing of it, I think will help me, because as with a lot of the films that you and I watch, Lisa, that we discuss, almost 99% of the time, you see things in the film that I don't see and aren't able to appreciate. So I think it helps for me to take these things into the film, knowing what to expect firstly, but also having two sets of eyes for my initial viewing. So I think I'll come out enjoying it quite a bit, actually.
Yeah,
so,
good.
Yeah.
And you'll be singing along when I put on how does it go? Every morning I wake up, I put on my makeup.
Yeah, that was it.
Something that
Something with an 8-track.
Yeah, something.
8-track.
We're
Yeah.
shitty. Anyway,
I'll
it's
watch
beautiful.
it so I can learn the words and I can sing it.
Yeah.
You should put that at the end of the episode.
All right. So your next homework assignment, Brian, is going to be given to you by.
It's coming from
Big Bad Mouth Dork.
Mouth Dork, yes, sir. So what do we have?
All right, my friend. As we discussed on a previous review cast for King Kong Skull Island, you have never seen
King Kong Lives?
I don't think you've seen that. Have you seen King Kong Lives?
That's the 70s version?
That's a sequel to the 70s version with Linda
sequel?
Hamilton. Oh no! Do I have to give him King Kong Lives?
Wait, Linda Hamilton was in that was
no. Linda Hamilton was in the sequel to King Kong from the 1970s with Jessica Lange and Jeff Bridges.
So you give him yours, I'll give him King Kong Lives.
So
was Jeff Bridges in King Kong Lives?
No, just Linda
Don't
Hamilton.
worry, you'll see.
Wait! I think I've seen King Kong Lives. Is that the one that had the female gorilla?
Yes.
With the
Yes.
breast.
Yes.
I do. Okay, that's the one I saw.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm safe. I can go back to my original plan.
I saw that at Land of them All. I remember.
I will not give you King Kong Lives.
I don't think I've seen the 70s version.
Oh. Should I give him the 70s version, Darren?
Which one is that one called?
That's called King Kong with Jeff Bridges and Jessica Lange and Charles Grodin.
You do your thing, B. I'll take care of Jeff Bridges' King Kong.
Well, you've never seen the 33 version, and I think that's where we have to go. I think we have to go back to the original Willis O'Brien stop motion animation and Marion Cooper's production, RKO. It's essential cinema, sir.
Okay, I've heard a lot about it, and I feel like that's been missing in my.
So you jumped straight to King Kong titties. You skipped Jeff Bridges' King Kong and 1933 King Kong. You just jumped straight to gorilla titties.
That's the only thing I remember from that movie.
King Kong Lives was prime cinema for 80s youth.
Yeah.
I mean, it was all over TV.
Yeah. Did they show gorilla titties on TV?
I don't know.
I don't gorilla titties on TV, but once you see gorilla titties, you can't not see them. So I'm seeing them right now.
Well, Brian, you get to watch the original.
Okay.
The original.
All right.
Yeah, why'd you pick this one, Brad? I mean, it's obvious, but,
I mean, it's one of my all-time favorite movies. Mm-hmm. It's, a building block in Hollywood history. Mm-hmm. You have to have seen this movie. Yeah. And I think there's a lot to talk about.
Okay. And because Brian, he had just did a rewatch. Was that Brian or you, Brad, that did a rewatch of Peter Jackson's?
That was me and Lisa. Okay. Lisa slept through it.
So it's just you. All right. All right. Well, so that's would be an interesting discussion. I'm going to go back and rewatch that one as well. Okay. So I can chime in. So be on the lookout for that, ladies and gentlemen. Brian's going to go back and watch the original King Kong. In the meantime, be on the lookout for It Mod Month, upcoming month of May. Each weekend, each Sunday in the month of May, each dork will have a movie of their choosing that they'll host and screen, thanks to Andy and Film Club 3.0.
Yeah, Alamo Winchester.
Yep, May 7th is me. May 14th is Lisa. Woo-hoo! May 21st is Brad. And May 28th is Brian Young. Also, be on the lookout for It Mod Spotlight. It Mod Spotlight this time is Bruce Lee. We're going to be talking about the next film in his filmography. This is Fist of Fury, also known as Chinese Connection. And then we got currently out right now is the Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead episode. And be on the lookout for the next one is Sarah Adina Smith.
Is that the next one, or is it Jamie Dagg?
Jamie Dagg, yeah, that one.
Director of Sweet Virginia, starring the one, the only John Barenthal.
Yep. And then Friday, we got a fistful of summer anticipation because the summer months are slowly coming up. Not slowly, quickly coming up. And so we got a shitload of films that I know, me personally, my fistful is going to be whittled down from like 10, 20, maybe 15 films. So, yeah, I'm excited.
My fistful is being whittled down from Baywatch number 5, Baywatch number 4, Baywatch number 3, Baywatch number 2, number 1, Baywatch.
Nice.
All right, you can find Brian William Young on Facebook at Brian William Young. On Twitter, he is the Turtle Dork. On Instagram, he is the Turtle Dork 1. Wife Dork is at Sidewalk Siren on Twitter and on Instagram and Letterboxd as well. Brad Gullickson is Mouth Dork on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Letterboxd, and Untapped. And I'm Darren Smith, the Disco Dork, on all social medias at the Disco Dork. That's going to do it for us. Thank you all for listening. We hope you enjoyed the episode. And until next time.